The camera snapped to life with that familiar electric hum, the kind that made the air in the studio almost vibrate. Stephen leaned forward on his desk, the kind of smile playing on his lips that wasn't entirely about joy, it was the kind that said, "I know something you don't." The audience erupted into applause before the words even left his mouth. "Oh, hey. Welcome back, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, my guest tonight was Vice President of the United States. Please welcome her back to the Late Show, Vice President Kamala Harris." The crowd went wild. The applause was thunderous, but not entirely uniform. There were a few awkward beats of hesitation here and there, pockets of silence in the sea of clapping, that the microphones tried their best to hide. The band swelled, horns blasting, but even from backstage, Kamala could sense it, this wasn't going to be a routine appearance. She stepped onto the stage, smile polished, gait steady, dressed in a deep navy suit that seemed to absorb the light and hold it close. Her eyes scanned the room, crowd, cameras, Stephen, and she could feel the heat from the stage lights on her cheeks. Her heels clicked on the floor with a rhythm that matched the adrenaline thrumming in her chest. "Madam Vice President," Stephen began as she sat down, "it's nice to see you again." "It's great to be here," she replied with that practiced warmth, but there was something just beneath the surface. Tiredness, maybe. Or resolve. "First of all," Stephen said, leaning back in his chair, "you look rested." A quick laugh escaped her. "Yeah. I'm happy for you," he added. "Thank you," she said, almost reflexively. "How you doing?" "Oh, I'm fine," Stephen said, "I'll get plenty of rest in June." It was a friendly enough exchange, but there was a tension in Stephen's posture, a watchfulness in Kamala's eyes. Both of them knew the conversation wasn't going to stay on small talk for long. "This is the first time you've been here as just a citizen, not a government official," Stephen continued. "Your 8th visit to the show. Thank you for being here." She smiled. "Thank you." Stephen's tone shifted, ever so slightly, as he mentioned her upcoming book. 107 Days. "But before we get into that, once you left office, how long before you turned on the news again?" Her answer came quick, "Months." There was laughter from the audience, but Kamala didn't break eye contact with Stephen. "I'm just not into self-mutilation," she added, "so, lots of cooking shows." It earned a chuckle, but Stephen was already moving forward. He wanted the real meat of the interview, the things that could make headlines by morning. He steered the conversation toward January 6, 2025. The day she, as vice president, had to stand in the Capitol and certify the election results, a moment heavy with political and personal history. "I was fully aware of what that moment required," she said, voice steady but slower now. "Not just of me, but of our country." Her words hung there for a moment. The band wasn't playing anymore. The audience seemed to lean forward in unison. "I remember the drive to the Capitol," she continued. "For years before, I'd been there as vice president-elect. And what Mike Pence did, what our Constitution requires, the importance of fulfilling those responsibilities. It was a difficult day. It conjured a lot." "Did you talk to Pence about that?" Stephen asked. "I did not," she replied, "but I've been very happy to compliment him for having the courage to do what he did." Stephen shifted in his chair, his tone almost playful again. "You announced yesterday you're not running for governor of California, even though in early polling you beat every other candidate by double digits." There was a subtle murmur in the audience, surprise, maybe disappointment. "Why sit this one out?" he asked. "Saving yourself for a different office?" Kamala leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but resolute. "Honestly, I don't want to go back in the system. I think it's broken." The words landed like a pin dropped in a silent room. Stephen blinked. The crowd shifted. It wasn't every day a politician admitted, plainly, that the machinery of governance itself had failed. "You think our systems aren't strong enough?" Stephen pressed. "They're not as strong as they need to be," she said. "And for now, I don't want to go back. I want to travel the country. I want to listen to people. And I don't want it to be transactional, where I'm asking for their vote." Stephen leaned in, voice tinged with disbelief. "To hear you say that, it's harrowing." "But it's also evident, isn't it?" she replied, locking eyes with him. And that's when it shifted. The tone. The air. The studio felt suddenly smaller, the lights sharper. She wasn't just talking to Stephen anymore, she was talking to every camera, every viewer, every critic, and every supporter watching from their living rooms. "You can never let anybody take your power from you," she said, her voice tightening just enough to feel personal. "Never." The words pulsed through the air. A few audience members clapped. Others just stared. And somewhere, out in the digital ether, clips of that moment were already being snipped and uploaded. As the conversation inched toward her book, the air in the room still carried the electricity from those words. "You can never let anybody take your power from you." In that instant, it wasn't just a political line, it was a challenge. And challenges have a way of lighting fires. And if you've made it this far into the story, you're going to want to stick around. The next parts, well, let's just say the temperature in that studio won't stop rising. So hit that subscribe button now, because you're going to want to see how this plays out. The smile Stephen had worn for the first half of the interview was starting to falter, not vanish, but twist into something more pointed. His pen tapped against his desk, an unspoken metronome marking the seconds between questions. He leaned forward again, narrowing the space between them, his voice calm but probing. So, he said, this book. 107 days. Shortest presidential campaign in history. The audience chuckled softly at the reminder, but Kamala didn't flinch. Books like this can be an audit of what happened, a guide for the future, or gossipy tell-alls. Which one is yours? She tilted her head slightly, almost as if she'd anticipated the question. It's a behind-the-scenes sharing of what it really means to run for president. The intensity, the personal toll, the beauty of what I saw in the people. Beauty? Stephen said, one eyebrow arched. A lot of people wouldn't use that word to describe politics right now. That's because they're forgetting something, she countered, her voice firm. During those 107 days, I saw Americans, different races, ages, beliefs, under the same roof, seeing themselves in each other. That is beautiful. It was genuine, it was powerful, but Stephen wasn't done. And yet, here you are, saying the system is broken. Kamala inhaled slowly, not breaking eye contact. It is. But the people are still strong. That's why I'm not running for governor, or anything else right now. I want to remind people of their power without asking for their vote. There was a low murmur in the audience, some impressed, some skeptical. And Stephen, sensing that flicker of division, sharpened his tone. You know, he said, as someone who was a senator, attorney general, vice president, hearing you say our systems aren't strong enough is, well, harrowing, yes, but it also sounds like you're walking away from the fight. That hit her like a quick jab. Kamala's smile thinned. Absolutely not. I will always be part of the fight. Always. But from outside the system, Stephen pressed. Yes. From outside. Because right now, my role is to get out there and remind people they can't give up their power. And if they've been made to feel small, afraid, or hopeless, that's when they have to fight harder. The crowd clapped at that, loud, but with a jagged edge to it. Applause from people who agreed, mixed with the quiet of those who didn't. Stephen's pen stopped tapping. You've said this is about the people's power. But, he paused, his gaze steady, what about your power? You had the chance to run again. To lead. And instead, you stepped away. Doesn't that send the wrong message? The air tightened. Even the band, sitting in the shadows, seemed frozen. Kamala's tone dropped, quieter now, but razor-sharp. It sends the message that no one person can fix this. And if people keep waiting for one leader to save them, they're going to be disappointed. This is on all of us. There was something in the way she said it, like it was aimed as much at Stephen as at the viewers. He flipped a card over on his desk, feigning casualness. Well, speaking of leaders, you had 107 days as a presidential candidate. Looking back, what would you have done differently? Her smile returned, but it was the kind that could cut glass. You'll have to read the book. The audience laughed, but Stephen's own laugh didn't quite reach his eyes. And you're recording the audiobook? He asked. I am, she said. Because if I'm going to tell my story, I'm going to tell it myself. For a moment, they stared at each other across the desk, two professionals who knew exactly what the other was doing, neither one willing to give an inch. Stephen shifted gears, but not to something safer. You had a great team. But you also had a mentor in the president, Joe Biden, who had just stepped away. At what point, after his, let's call it a difficult debate, did people start telling you, you might need to be ready to take over? Kamala took a measured breath. There were some who said that. But it was Joe's decision. And I respected it. You respected it, Stephen said slowly, but then you had to separate yourself from him as a candidate. You had to tell people what made you different from him. That's in the book too, she replied, almost curt now. And I'll tell you this, I wasn't going to pile on. There was a lot of piling on at that time, and I wasn't going to participate in it. Stephen smiled faintly, but it was a predator's smile. One person you did pile on was Trump. The crowd stirred at the name. That debate, Stephen continued, was, frankly, one of the greatest rhetorical performances I've ever seen. You warned everyone about what a Trump presidency would look like. And you were right. Kamala's gaze sharpened. What I didn't predict, she said, was the capitulation. I didn't see so many people rolling over for him. People who were supposed to be guardians of our democracy, just capitulating. Her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Somewhere in the audience, a cough broke the silence. Stephen leaned forward again, voice low. Do you think they're just trying to ride out the storm? Wait for it to pass? That's naive, she said without hesitation. Some are using it as an excuse to be feckless. And this is no time for fecklessness. The crowd erupted into applause, but Stephen didn't smile this time. He could feel it, the temperature rising, the edges fraying. What had started as a polite interview was becoming something else entirely. And in that moment, it was clear, neither of them was going to walk away from this without leaving a mark. The room was no longer the same studio it had been just half an hour ago. The air felt denser now, as though every molecule had been weighed down by the gravity of what had just unfolded. The lights, still glaringly bright, seemed to bleach the set of its warmth, casting harsh edges on every surface, every face. And at the center of it all, Kamala Harris sat in a way that was both composed and trembling, the perfect contradiction. Her smile was still there, but the edges were cracked. The host leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming idly on the desk, an unconscious tell, or maybe an intentional show of control. He didn't look at her immediately. Instead, he let the silence stretch, a masterstroke in television tension. The audience shifted in their seats, unsure whether to laugh, clap, or hold their breath. Every camera in the room was on them, every red recording light glowing like a watchful eye. Finally, he leaned forward. So, he said, his voice quieter now, but more dangerous in its calmness, are you telling me you're still certain? That every choice, every decision you've made in the last 4 years, was the right one? Kamala didn't blink. I'm saying, she replied slowly, that leadership isn't about always being right. It's about standing in the fire, even when you know you'll get burned. And I've been burned more times than I can count. She paused, letting the words hang. But I'm still here. The line was good. Too good. It was the kind of answer that usually closed an interview, but tonight, it didn't. The host smirked faintly, leaning his elbow on the desk. Still here, he echoed. But for how long? That landed like a punch. A murmur ran through the audience. The director in the control room must have been having a meltdown of his own, frantically deciding whether to cut to commercial or let the cameras roll. Kamala's smile froze for a fraction of a second, not long enough for most people to notice, but just enough for those paying attention to wonder what nerve had just been struck. She leaned in, her voice soft but dangerous now. Are you asking if I can survive this political climate? Or are you asking if you and your network can survive me? That was the moment the air truly left the room. A laugh from somewhere in the back of the audience died halfway out of someone's throat. The host's smirk faltered, replaced with something sharper, maybe annoyance, maybe respect. I'm asking, he said slowly, if you've realized that the fire you keep standing in might be one you started yourself. For a beat, she didn't answer. Just sat there, breathing evenly, eyes locked on him. The audience wasn't clapping anymore, they weren't even moving. It was as if the entire building had been frozen in that single, impossible moment. Then, Kamala leaned back, exhaled, and let the faintest grin return. Maybe I did start it, she admitted. But here's the thing about fire, it clears the deadwood. It makes way for something new to grow. And when the smoke clears, the ones who can't take the heat are already gone. The host didn't reply right away. He just looked at her, as though weighing whether to keep pushing or to end it right there. Finally, with a thin smile, he said, well, here's to the survivors. He raised his coffee mug. She didn't raise hers. The audience applauded, tentatively at first, then louder, filling the studio with a sound that was part approval, part nervous energy. The music swelled as the camera slowly zoomed out, but in the tight frame on Kamala's face, you could still see it, the fire in her eyes, the kind that says this isn't over. Because it wasn't. Moments like this don't fade quietly into history. They ripple. They spread. They become the clips people replay at midnight on their phones, the moments pundits analyze frame by frame, the interviews that define, or destroy, careers. And somewhere, in living rooms across the country, people were watching, choosing sides, and wondering just how much more of this story was still to come. Hit subscribe, and don't look away. Because in this game, the real drama starts after the cameras stop rolling.